Hello guys, this is CannibalChess, and in today's video I'm going to be going over a game that GothamChess played against Daniel Naroditsky inside a Title Tuesday match, and they were both even in the event up until this point, so whoever won this game won the tiebreak basically. And so Daniel with the white pieces starts with a queen's pawn opening, so pawn to d4, Levy responds to d5, and then they go into the Chigorian variation here, so they develop their minor pieces to very nice squares. Levy continues with pawn to e6, making way for his dark square bishop to come out, so maybe he can castle sometime soon. And then here Daniel goes for this weird idea of going knight to b5, which looks kind of strange because you think, well, Levy can just push the knight back, but Levy doesn't go for that. He instead goes for bishop to b4, which looks kind of weird because you're like, well, I mean, Daniel can just push c3, and then the bishop's going to have to go back, so why even waste a move? But Levy has a plan here, and so does Daniel. So he does indeed go pawn c3. Levy's fine with going back to a5, and here Daniel, he actually pushes a4 instead of pushing b4. And so Levy finally decides to try and push the knight back, which doesn't work because Daniel, he creates this counterattack where, if you take my knight, I'm going to take your bishop, which for some reason Levy doesn't go for. So he instead moves his bishop back, which actually ends up being his first mistake in the game. And the computer suggesting playing knight here. So after Daniel takes, then Levy would be able to take, and somehow it would be still an even game at that point. Or even, I believe, taking the knight here. Levy taking the knight here would have been a pretty good move as well. But instead he moves his bishop back, and that allows Daniel to push a5. And so here Levy takes, Daniel takes, and then they rook trade as well. And this allows Daniel this nice open A file, which Levy closes down immediately, so he doesn't actually have the A file. But then Daniel takes the c7 pawn, and in the commentary that Daniel was doing during the game, he was like saying, why not take this pawn? And it really is true because there's nothing Levy can really do about the pawn right now. If he tries to take it with the knight, then that would allow Daniel to just move queen to a5 and then kind of pin the knight on the queen, and you would have these two threats on the knight. So that just wouldn't be a very good position for Levy. So he can't really take the pawn, so he does the best move in the situation, which is queen d7. And so he's able to defend this pawn, but also try and get his queen a little bit active as well. So here Daniel continues with pawn to e3. Computer saying knight to f3 would have been better, I'm assuming, to go after this nice outpost and then hit the queen as well. But Daniel doesn't go for that right now. He wants to get his light square bishop active and maybe hit this weak pawn that would unlock, this diagonal as well. So he goes for that. Levy shuts it down by castling, which is good on him. And then here he finally goes knight to f3. The computer suggesting h4, I'm assuming just to create some counterplay on the king side right after Levy castled, maybe even rook lift at some point to create some threats. I'm assuming that's what the computer is suggesting, but of course I'm not sure. This is Stockfish. So yeah, Daniel plays knight to f3, and then Levy, he actually makes a mistake here, or inaccuracy, again by letting the queen come to a5 here. And even though the queen's not on d8 right now, this is still not something good to allow Daniel to do, because it's just letting the queen come into the game, and there's more pressure now on this b5 pawn as well. So Levy plays the only move that he can basically, and that is putting more defense on this knight. He also wants to maybe play this d6 move at some point to defend this pawn as well. So that's why he plays that move. And Daniel here, he doesn't, it's not too good of a move, but he's basically just trying to get his last minor piece a little bit more active. He's hitting this pawn, he's also still hitting this one, and he's also able to castle now, in which after he castles, then his rook can come to a1 and start hitting this a file as well, which is a good plan for Daniel for sure. So Levy doesn't find the move knight to d6, which would have helped defend the b5 pawn, and I'm sure there's a few other reasons why that would have been a good move as well. maybe to defend the e4 square from the pawn coming up, maybe. But in any case, this is just not a very good move by Levy, probably because it's making this pawn weaker. That might have been somewhat of the reason here. So Daniel, of course, plays a very human move. He continues by castling, which is fine. Levy finally sees the move, and then Daniel finally sees this move as well. So they both kind of spot like the moves they should have done a few moves ago. So Daniel is hitting this knight, but he's also wanting to hit this pawn, but he can't right now because the knight came here to guard the pawn. And I think another reason why he played this queen to b6 move is because he's seeing that it has this use that it's hitting these two knights, but it also has the use of getting the queen out of the way of the rook when it comes to a1. So there's a few reasons why he played queen to b6 here. Levy continues by getting his rook a little bit more active. And then here Daniel, of course, brings his rook to an open file. Levy puts his knight back on a6, which makes sense. Computer saying he should have rerouted it, which I guess kind of makes sense. And here Daniel in the commentary, he says like there's no point in not doing a bunch of trades because it doesn't really hinder his position. He also gets this free pawn out of it. So it just makes the game closer to finishing, and he still has a winning position here. So Levy, he brings his knight back. He wants to get the light square bishop out of the way, so Daniel has to bring it back. And then here there are a few king moves. Levy decides to go after this weak c3 pawn because it can't really move forward very easily because then it'll just get taken. So then Daniel has to defend it with rook a3. Levy tries to make a way for this pawn to come up the board, and then Daniel just kind of ignores that. They make a few king moves, get into the center of the board. Daniel finally does the e4 push that I mentioned earlier that he could maybe do. And then here, of course, it would be good for Daniel if Levy took the pawn on e4, because then that would allow him this nice diagonal hitting the rook and also the pawn, and then he would also have ideas of hitting the pawn again after the rook move, maybe to something like b6 or something like that. So of course he would want Levy to take, but he doesn't, and instead he plays this strange move of pushing the pawn. It seems logical because you're cutting off more squares for the knight to use, but this bishop idea is actually stronger. And I think the idea of this move is, of course, just to get the bishop active, maybe to be able to put it on this square at some point if the knight or if the rook moved, and it would be defended by the knight, so then you could contest this strong light square bishop, I think is the idea here. But Levy doesn't see it. So instead, this allows Daniel to just push his pawn. Levy doesn't take because that would be just a horrible idea. And then they have a few of these trades. And at this point, Daniel's position is kind of, well, it's definitely winning here. So Levy has to play pretty well to find the best moves to win here, or he could just wait for Daniel to play something like this. I mean, it did like make his position almost completely winning to like not so winning. So Levy finds the best move here, which in the commentary Daniel's like, I didn't even see that move as an option, but somehow this is basically a defense against it because it allows the king to guard the bishop when it comes here to attack the pawn, basically. So if the knight takes the bishop, then you just trade pieces, and then this knight can still take the pawn because the bishop's the only thing guarding it. So after take, then you would have this, and so this is basically well, it's the best move, obviously, for Levy here. And so Daniel just continues with trying to put some defense on the pawn and get rid of Levy's other pawns, which Levy's fine with taking. And then Levy plays the move that I just mentioned. He can play this now. So Daniel swings his rook over to h3, trying to go after the remaining pawns. And then Levy can finally take this pawn, winning back the material, but then Daniel can take this pawn, and so he doesn't really win back the material. And this also allows Daniel a way into the rank that the king's on. And so Levy here continues by taking the bishop on c4. Daniel plays this check on the king, and here obviously he's not expecting Levy to go something like this. He's expecting him to go here. and then he would maybe be able to take the bishop, and the game would just go on. But instead, Levy he plays this blunder, and even here it was funny because Daniel he was like so tired that he didn't even see the checkmate and won, and he was like almost about to play this like rook takes knight move, and it was just really funny to see like him that tired, but he still beat Levy by playing rook to f7. So yeah, that was the Title Tuesday match, the tiebreak game against Levy and Daniel Naroditsky. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel, and as always, thanks for watching.